Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful individuals. It is another epi of League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you, gorgeous folks, as we begin Split 2 in the most premier of regions, as we've seen over the last couple of years, only further cemented by the first stand results. Yes, we're talking LCK, and of course, before you even get to the games, you know we gotta break down the LCK openers because nobody does it like South Korea for these teasers.
And man, they hit pretty hard again with the Split 2 LCK opening, and we get an extra dash of spice, a little bit of seasoning in this one, because yes, your eyes don't deceive you. That is six, count them all, 6 members of T1 featured in this intro video.
Yeah, I mean, no, they know how to play up the storylines that are coming into the year, coming into the split, right? You first off, you have the transition from Zeus on Hanwha into Doran, and somehow with these trailers, even though Hanwha Life are the defending LCK and first stand champions, it still feels like they make T1 the final boss for these videos. But yeah, you have Smash in the background, and then you have all six T1 members on this platform, and I don't want to speculate, but I'm just saying Smash is standing by Kyria and is kind of one step forward on the stage. I'm just saying.
Someone call Joe Marsh. He'll get on the case. He'll make sure it's a Guma.
We got to redo. We got to re-edit this whole video, guys, please.
Yeah, but I think you're right. I think if I'm a Hanwha Life guy or any fan of these players, I'd be a little bit upset that you don't get kind of that recognition, that billing, that drama, suspense within the opening, that you are the champions, that you are the final boss sitting at that throne at the very end, because deservedly so. You won summer last year, you win this winter split this time around LCK Cup, and you go to first stand and you represent strongly winning that event for you. I'd be a little bit disrespected if I am Hanwha Life. You have to obviously understand the landscape of the LCK and knowing the perpetual titans that T1 is. So that is part of why they get that type of treatment. But still, even with a Gen.G hanging around, D plus Kia, T1, had to have Hanwha Life kind of, shoved aside a little bit and not really get any special treatment in this opening. Feels like the one real miss when you're looking at this one for me.
Yeah, they were like the second team that was revealed, I think, after the DN Freecs, which is max disrespect. I will say, I think it took like 3 LCK titles and the MSI title before they fully put Gen.G as that final boss in a lot of these videos, so maybe it's one more split under the belt for Hanwha. They were still probably the most featured, and we did get a different type of reunion or showcase for at least Peanut when you had on stage before their matchups, we had a Rocks Tigers reunion. 4/5 of the starting 5. Gorilla wasn't there. And again, if you haven't been following the pro scene for, this was 9 years ago, going back to 2016, but Smeb, Kuro, Peanut, and Prey were there. They were even doing their poses that they were doing from when they were winning titles. But this is one of the most adored rosters of all time.
And hey, shout outs to Prey. Prey's looking good, looking real healthy, losing a bit of weight too. Love to see
fresh cut on. Yeah.
Looking clean. And yeah, this one's for the old guys. This one's for the boomers like us, remembering the Rocks Tigers, the excitement, the thrill of what a roster that they were, going as the underdogs against so much of the titanic organizations that you had at that period in League of Legends, really turning the tables. And to get that little reunion before we step back into the LCK Split 2 here in 2025 really felt nice, and a little bit of a tip of the cap salute to the rest of the Rocks Tigers and our buddy Gorilla over there doing his military service. Only reason it wasn't the full reunion of the Rocks Tiger squad.
But all of them seemed so happy to be there, and they played some of the older videos of the Rocks Tigers winning, and of course Peanut was laughing. But really, seeing this reunion like this, Prey, Smeb, Kuro have all been retired for multiple years now. I know Peanut was the young gun rookie on this roster, but to still see him not just playing years after these guys have been retired, but he's still winning everything as one of the premier junglers in the LCK. So moments like this really just make you further appreciate the career and everything that Peanut has accomplished.
I'm telling you, who's the Korean Cadril out there? We need to find them, get an organization together, bring back.
Is it T1 Wolf? T1
Tigers,
Wolf?
Las Ratonas. There it is. Bring it together. Bridge the gap for these organizations. Would love to see something like that come through with the old guard of the LCK.
Maybe Ambition put together a squad with guys like Wolf. There's lots of people you could choose from the South Korean scene.
Yeah, I would love to see that type of thing come through one of these passion projects in the way that the landscape of League of Legends is going to be forever changed by this Las Ratonas experiment. I don't think it's crazy or, out of bounds to start dreaming, start thinking about them, even in regions as prestigious, as focused as the LCK.
And it was all fun for Peanut, having fun with the boys, reunited. Then we actually get on the Rift and we talk about it. We used to talk about it with the midseason invitational, the potential hangover for coming back, all the jet lag, all the travel. Well, Hanwha Life didn't have that because it was in Seoul. Obviously, they didn't have to travel, but they might have been guilty of playing to the level of competition that was at the event because this was a hungry, angry Gen.G on the day, and maybe a better series out of Canyon and Chovy than we probably got in the entire winter split. These guys were locked in.
It's a classic pitfall for any of these type of teams that is coming off of one of these international trips or anything else like that. How do you bring that same level of intensity, that same locked in focus that you did when the stakes, what was that, on the line, what you could earn, all these things is so different than a regular season appearance. Even if you put the extra importance on that, this is the debut of this split and, the importance of a matchup against Gen.G, all of that. None of it can really get deep down into your core and get you prepared the same way that you do in those matchups. And yes, playing down to your opponent seems to be the way, the after effect for this Hanwha Life team, because nowhere close to prepared or up to the task what was on the other side from Gen.G on the day. And it all starts in that game one with your boy Chovy popping off. And is that Canyon? Oh, that's Canyon. That is LCK champion Canyon in the jungle. He's online for split 2.
That wasn't D plus Canyon. That was Dom1. We're going way back to Dom1 Canyon. Yeah, they pull out the Vi Ari, which we know is a very comfortable fallback pick for a lot of teams, but man, did they make it look good early and often. There were a pair of aces early in this game, and we're talking clean aces, complete stomps the way of Gen.G. They ended this first game with a 20k gold lead, 20,000, and honestly it felt like this game could have ended 6 to 7 minutes earlier, but Gen.G, they were playing with their food a little bit and trying to make a statement that the LCK is just straight up harder than First Stand.
Yeah, and I think, well, I don't know if anyone was really stepping away from First Stand with that type of conclusion.
Pretty obvious, yeah.
The LCK Cup and every year before that as well. You can add that one in. But yeah, Gen.G playing with their food, picking up some kills, having some fun times. And I think really one of the things that came through in this match for me was the absolute cliff that you can drop off of if you're on a team with Nefiri that is not in a position to utilize it, to get those resets, to start, getting her the angles of opportunity in these attacks where you can pressure it. Peanut had no options in this game on that. Nefiri really was a tough position to try and navigate through.
Yeah, and it kind of felt like, Peanut, I'm sure they've been scrimming a lot with this pick. They've been seeing it in other regions popping off, and it felt like he was feeling himself. There were a couple of moments he went in a little deep and completely got popped because, there were only 2 kills total for Hanwha in this game.
Tigers Peanut would have been popping off.
He said, let me cook up with this carry pick and really take over, and he ended up finishing 1-5-1, and Canyon completely dismantled him. And, you thought maybe this would infuriate Hanwha to kind of, let's face it, get styled on a bit in that first game. But game 2 was definitely closer, and Gen.G, fell on the back foot a little bit early on. But again, quickly, this one got out of control. We have lived so many Azir Corki metas, but now we've evolved to where they're both on the same team as Chovy and Ruler both have a pop-off, and we have a couple absolutely vintage Azir Shurima shuffles out of Chovy.
Oh, we've entered the darkest of timelines when the two opposing forces of Corki and Azir can unite on the same side, and not just unite on the same side, be piloted by Chovy and Ruler. That is
Yeah, two pretty good guys. Yeah.
Pretty darn scary to hand that over to you. And yes, as you said, Chovy with some wonderfully smooth Azir shuffles coming on through, shifting the sands of time and shifting the way that this game turned out for Gen.G. Oh, you did have a bit, I think, a bit more of that pushback, a bit more of that resistance from the Hanwha Life squad in this matchup, getting a win here or there across the map, but never anywhere enough to change the landscape, what was going to be in these later team fights, where it really then became about that execution on the side of Gen.G with the tools, the team fighting skills that they have to take over. And you saw that fully. This was that 2-0 clean win from Gen.G.
Yeah, both sub 30 minutes and 20K gold lead in that first game, 11K in the second. So absolute domination. And listen, this is again good for the LCK to have Gen.G playing at a much higher level. And remember, way back in winter, this was a first week matchup, and it was again Gen.G 2-0ing this new look Hanwha Life roster. Hanwha Life is fully a squad that the bigger the stakes are, the higher level they're going to play, especially the microcosm that is Zeka in the mid lane. He's saying this is series number 1. It's not even a best of 5. Call me when playoffs roll around, because that's kind of what it felt like. And as we mentioned, I'm sure there was a hangover despite not having to travel from first stand.
For the LCK, it's a positive where you see that Gen.G has responded to being challenged not just by a T1, not just by D plus Kia, but usurped by a Hanwha Life in that situation in the LCK, getting the championship summer, spring, going to the first stand, and having that bounce back in the mid lane from Chovy to really reclaim that spot, really put something out, a shot across against Zeka. Really like seeing that one for Gen.G. Doesn't mean that you have any real serious concerns about whether this cloud, fog, hangover, whatever you want to describe for Hanwha Life is going to linger or stay all too long in the LCK.
Pretty much, yeah, all positives. And listen, it's been a while since we had a series like this out of Zeus on Hanwha Life, but we had these all the time for him on T1, where you're kind of going, what is our boy doing?
Yeah, you get a couple of head scratchers in this one. I think there were obviously enough other problems going for Hanwha Life in this series that you weren't maybe, over the top seeing that as the problem. But yeah, a little bit familiar. I think T1 fans can identify with this type of performance from Zays here and there.
And I'll tell you what, Cloud9 fans can identify with the DN Freecs having to watch poor old Berserker sit there 6-0-6 on an Ezreal, doing his very best to keep his squad alive. But the DN Freecs, we thought winter was maybe, or whatever, the first split in the LCK was a fluke. This team should be better than the results that they got, but it looks like more of the same, and that's these 5 players just not being in sync on the Rift.
The first thing, you got to give credit over to DRX. I think that's the important thing within this win in the series. There was a lot of positive things going right for them. And of course, I'm biased here, but my favorite one is Teddy popping off in the bottom lane, still contributing, the veteran as he has now become in the LCK. Love to see
and remember, he was sick
DR.
a lot of this first LCK Cup and wasn't able to play. And yeah, he's looking peak form already.
It's a very different, a focus in the path that this DRX team is driving out there on Summoner Rift when you've got Teddy behind the wheel, when he is there making the calls, making the damage happen for the team. But yes, the frustration with the DN Freecs on the other side, it is still keep going on. And this is one of the most unfortunate stories in the LCK to see this, because I think anybody can identify, even with what has been going on with this team, the individual potential for almost all of the members on this team, and see the path, see the equation of, okay, talent, young people, put them together. Maybe we're going to, keep going up, exploding in the LCK, all these things. And it's not worked out in any type of way. I think right now, the potential, the sum of the parts of this team is worse than what they actually are individually on the end of the day. And the only one that is really kind of showing his mettle, showing his worth, and being able to get any type of traction here is Berserker, But the problem is that falls off the wheels when you get into these mid to later team fights, when everyone else on the team is not in a position to be able to be serviceable in these fights. And it is an instant collapse onto Berserker from the enemy team.
Yeah, it feels like by the time the Freaks are actually, set up together, all on the same page, ready to fight, two guys are already dead or there's misposition. They're not all in the same area. It's a mess. And I feel like a guy like Dudu, we've been waiting to say he's been a standout on some weaker teams. Now he's got a seemingly solid roster around him. And this game was a doo-doo because Rich absolutely gapped him and was probably the biggest individual factor in both of these games.
And this is one of those ones, the fluctuation of where people are going to evaluate someone like Rich on the other side. But if you're getting bullied by Rich, that's not a good look for what else is still available. The top tiers of the top laners in the LCK. Yes, Dudu, laner Dudu in this series. And then as well, you can even look at players like Pyosik. Look at Bulldog in the mid lane. Guys who this opportunity with this young team, it was supposed to be that next step forward, that next evolution in your career, to take more responsibility, to take that next level step forward. And we haven't seen it from both of these guys. And in fact, I would argue with Bulldog, we've probably seen a step backwards, which has really been probably the biggest disappointment out of all of them when you look at this roster.
Yeah, especially because this is a series where UCal was definitely having some fun. He was Valkyring forward in a lot of these games, kind of playing a little on the knife's edge, but that wasn't enough to really get anything out of the DN Freaks, even with him playing that way. So unfortunately, the disappointment just continues for what carried over in that first split of action in the LCK. We're approaching split number 2, week number 1. In the LTA North, the last now of the major regions to kick things off. There was a little preseason pros episode with Blabber, Busio, and Jan, and they were kind of talking about, obviously recapping first stand, blah, 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 and the power rankings for the LTA North. They really only bothered speaking about the top 4, which I understand, and they basically said if one of these top 4 squads isn't representing at MSI, something terrible has had to have happened, which I think you and I both probably agree with.
I do agree. I think there's the slimmest of possibilities and chances that one of the bottom 4 teams finds a way to really reinvent themselves, figure it out, and it's a positive story about them coming through. But really, yeah, I think that is the fair and accurate read and representation of the LTA to say that if it isn't one of these top 4 teams, it is going to be that disappointment. It is going to be something has drastically gone wrong for multiple organizations within the LTA to have it collapse like that. But the interesting thing for me is not even from that pros episode where they are talking about that stuff, but it's from Bwipo on the side coming on through and saying he expects FlyQuest heading into this split to be the 4th of the top teams in the LTA, putting like Cloud9, 100 Thieves, Team Liquid ahead of a squad like FlyQuest. Seems a little strange to be doing that from my perspective. Maybe he's just trying to lower some expectations heading into split 2.
Maybe he talked to some the management coaching staff and they were like, the first split you beat Shopify clearly, and then you kind of trash talk the entire region. Maybe we pump the brakes. Maybe we do set those expectations lower so that you can easily jump over those hurdles, because the 3 guys that were all on this pros episode pretty much all had 100 Thieves as that 4th best team of the big 4. That's because there was no representative from 100 Thieves there, but that seems like the easiest answer, even though 100 Thieves just beat FlyQuest in the playoffs in Brazil.
Feels like the easiest and probably most correct answer, but I don't think it's absolutely one that everybody should be getting their Sharpie, getting their pen, making it permanent ink when they're writing that one down, because there is room for that 100 Thieves team to surprise, to grow over this time away and during this split 2 that we're going to be having. That's going to be, I think, one of the interesting things about this top 4 is you can talk about having, the dark horse and all these type of things, but having that established 4 where it is, these are the ones that are going to be competing, contending at that point, seeing where they go up and down, that's going to be an interesting storyline throughout the LTA.
The other interesting little nugget from these guys talking was Jan saying, again, no one really was like Team Liquid is the de facto number 1 squad. I think a lot of that is probably how First Stand ends up finishing out for them, of course. But Jan was saying it was actually a huge advantage, he thinks, that Team Liquid, when they were playing in Brazil, they have this massive Sao Paulo facility from Team Liquid that they were able to train and practice in, whereas the other LTA North squads, had to go through the grind of playing in a hotel or going to some rented out space and then going back to the hotel. Team Liquid, he was saying they felt very comfortable because they had this massive setup, and yeah, that sounds right.
That's no question. That's an advantage to me in that type of situation. And when you look at the rest of the LTA, heck, you could even extend that to the LEC. LCK, might be the only one I think that could, rival in that type of way, maybe with an organization like T1 and their connections that they have. But to have the facilities that Team Liquid does have, as you said, they got one, of course, within Los Angeles for the LTA. Then you go down to Sao Paulo, you got one there. They've got one in Europe as well. Then when you go over there, that type of situation, that is an advantage. I would love to maybe see that advantage on the Rift a couple more times and take on. I think that's where we really need to see that, because we didn't get to see that at first stand.
So they need a facility in South Korea next so they can compete.
Just all over the world, just global LTA facilities for us to help it out. I expect Team Liquid to be that top team right out of the gate for the LTA. Whether that's going to last through the first week, the second week, that's going to be, I think, the real interesting thing when you're looking at this top four and where they have improved. Because a team like Cloud9, I think a lot of us thought back when we're going through that event, should have been a bigger player, but unfortunately their performance when it mattered most at that event wasn't there.
And the most important thing is, yes, the region is incredibly top heavy with those top four, but as these pros and a lot of us have said, it feels like any of the top four could win, or at least at a very comparable level, that the region should be incredibly competitive. First 3 weeks are best of ones, remember, so we got to pump the brakes for the hype for the first few weeks.
Yeah, that's going to be a bit of a difficult situation to try and, stomach and sort it out as far as even within the LTA region, never mind about a global type of situation, assorting where the power is for that one. It's going to be a brief one, at least. It's going to be shorter than we were expecting heading into this split. But yes, we do need to stomach the best of ones, keep it all in mind before we get towards where it really starts to get a little bit juicier with Fearless Draft later on.
At least the best of ones kick off with a banger. Team Liquid FlyQuest, the first match of Split 2. So thank you, Based Riot schedulers, for at least giving us that, even though it's not best of 3. But that is it today for League Unlocked.